Story 1. The Backup Generator. The security company said the old hospital would be an easy gig. Just 12 hours overnight, making sure no teenagers broke in to throw parties in the abandoned wings. The demolition was scheduled for next month. Everything of value had already been stripped. The East Wing still has power, my supervisor explained. Backup generator kicks in automatically if the grid goes down. Rest of the building's dark. I nodded, pretending I wasn't already regretting taking this job. 5 stories of crumbling drywall and exposed wiring. 30 years of medical procedures, deaths, and suffering concentrated in one massive concrete structure. My first night started uneventfully. I set up in the security office with my thermos and sandwich, checking the ancient CCTV system. Half the cameras were dead, showing only static, but the parking lot and main entrances were covered. At 11:27 p.m., the power went out. For 3 seconds, I sat in complete darkness. Then the backup generator hummed to life, and the dim emergency lights flickered on. The CCTV monitors rebooted one by one. Camera 3 East Wing entrance showed a figure entering the building. My heart jumped. I hadn't heard the door. Leaning closer to the grainy monitor, I could make out someone in dark clothing moving purposefully through the hallway. I radioed dispatch. Possible intruder in the East Wing. The radio crackled. Copy that. Police response time about 20 minutes. Can you confirm intruder? I'll check it out, I replied, unholstering my flashlight. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the generator. I moved cautiously, listening for any sound. Nothing. I completed a sweep of the first floor, finding no one. The security office was empty when I returned. The figure must have gone upstairs or into another wing. As I sat back at the desk, I noticed something odd on the monitors. Camera 5 covering the staff lounge showed the microwave clock blinking 12 o'clock. The power reset had triggered it. But camera 3, where I'd seen the figure, showed the clock reading 11:27. I stared at the time, confusion giving way to unease. I checked my watch. 12:10 a.m. Then I noticed something else. The figure I'd seen on camera 3 was wearing the exact same uniform I was wearing. I replayed the footage. The timestamp read 11:27 p.m., the exact moment the power went out. As I watched, the lights died and the camera went to static for 3 seconds. When the image returned, emergency lights illuminated a security guard me walking into the building. But I'd been sitting in the office when the power failed. My radio crackled. Unit 14, update on your intruder? I keyed the mic with trembling fingers. False alarm. Just shadows. Checking the other cameras, I noticed camera 8 basement access was now working despite being dead earlier. It showed the backup generator room door standing open. I shouldn't go down there. Yet I found myself walking to the basement stairs, drawn by a need to understand. The basement was colder than the rest of the building. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the generator room at the end of the hall. The heavy door was indeed open, the massive generator inside rumbling steadily. That's when I saw the logbook on the wall. I approached it slowly, running my light over the entries. The last one read, 11:27 p.m. scheduled maintenance complete. It was signed with my name, my handwriting. But I hadn't been down here. I hadn't signed anything. The generator's hum suddenly changed pitch, dropping lower, almost groaning. The lights flickered. Behind me, the heavy door began to swing closed. I lunged, barely making it through before it slammed shut with a metallic clang. I pulled the handle, locked. My radio was silent no matter how many times I tried dispatch. I made my way back upstairs, increasingly desperate to reach the security office. When I finally got there, I froze in the doorway. The monitors showed every camera functioning perfectly now. On camera 6, the security office, I could see myself sitting at the desk, back to the door, watching the monitors. But I was standing in the doorway. As I watched, the figure at the desk slowly turned. The face was mine, but wrong somehow, eyes too dark, expression too still. The radio on the desk crackled to life. Unit 14, be advised. Previous security guard found deceased in generator room. Apparent accident during maintenance. Proceed with caution. The figure at the desk smiled at the camera. Then it reached forward and cut the feed. The lights went out. The generator did not turn back on. Story 2. Darkroom. I never should have answered that ad on the photography forum. Urban Explorer needed for abandoned factory documentation. Professional equipment provided. $2,000 for 1 day's work. When Martin contacted me, his explanation seemed reasonable. His architectural firm was bidding on the redevelopment of the old Eastman chemical plant. He needed detailed photos, but couldn't go himself because of liability issues with his firm. Just say you're an independent photographer if anyone asks, he said, handing me a key to the side entrance. The developer gave us access for assessment. The expensive camera bag he provided contained top-of-the-line equipment. I need comprehensive coverage, all 5 floors, special attention to the production areas and basement labs. What about security? I asked. Minimal. Daytime guard patrols the perimeter twice, otherwise it's empty. Martin checked his watch. I'll meet you back here at 6 p.m. Remember, detailed shots of everything, especially the basement labs. The side door opened with a metallic groan. Inside, the air was heavy with industrial solvents and something else, a Swedish decay that made my nose wrinkle. The main production floor was a cathedral to abandoned industry massive vats and conveyor systems frozen in time. I started shooting, finding unexpected beauty in the decay. The camera's low-light performance was exceptional. I took hundreds of photos, working systematically through the upper floors. By midday, I'd covered 4 floors. All that remained was the basement labs. The stairwell leading down was darker than the rest of the building, my flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. The basement was a maze of corridors and small rooms. Many doors were locked, but enough were open to provide the coverage Martin wanted. I photographed lab equipment, storage areas, and testing facilities. At the end of the longest corridor stood a heavy metal door labeled Darkroom. It was locked, but the keyring Martin had given me included a small key that fit. The room beyond was indeed a darkroom larger than any I'd seen, with multiple enlargers and processing stations. But something was off. The equipment looked recently used. No dust covered the surfaces. In the corner stood a metal cabinet. Inside were hundreds of photographs. I pulled one out. It showed the factory's main floor, exactly as I had photographed it earlier. Another showed the administration offices on the 3rd floor. Each photograph matched areas I had just documented. A chill ran down my spine. These couldn't be my photos. I hadn't developed anything. Yet they showed exactly the same angles I had chosen. The last folder contained something different, photographs of people inside the factory. In each image, the subject stood in one of the rooms I had photographed, looking directly at the camera with confusion or fear. The final photos in each series showed the same subjects but clearly dead, their bodies arranged in grotesque positions. With shaking hands, I checked the dates on the backs. The most recent was from last week. That's when I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. I killed my flashlight and pressed against the wall behind the door, heart hammering. The footsteps stopped outside the darkroom. Hello? Anyone in there? A security guard. Relief flooded through me. Yes, in here, I called out, stepping forward. The door opened, light spilling in, but it wasn't a security guard. It was Martin, camera in hand. Found the darkroom, I see, he said casually. Did you get all the shots I needed? Martin, what the hell is this? I held up one of the death photos. What's going on here? His expression didn't change. Just a hobby of mine. I find abandoned places have the perfect atmosphere for my artistic pursuits. He raised his camera. I was hoping you'd make it back upstairs. The chase makes for better composition, but this works too. I lunged for the door, but he blocked my way. Nobody knows you're here, he said calmly. Your forum account is untraceable. We have all the time in the world to create something memorable. I threw the nearest container of chemicals at him and ran. The darkroom had another exit, a small door I hadn't noticed before. It led to a narrow corridor and another stairwell. I could hear Martin behind me, unhurried, calling out like we were playing a game. Each subject reacts differently. This is going to be a fascinating series. I reached the stairwell and started climbing, praying it led outside. Instead, I emerged onto the main production floor. Daylight was fading. Shadows stretched across the vast space. Martin's voice echoed through the factory. "I've been using this location for years. I know every exit, every hiding place." I sprinted toward the side entrance where we'd come in. The door was locked. From my pocket, I pulled out the memory card I'd been using all day. If I couldn't escape, maybe the photos could. I hid it under a loose tile by the door. Martin's footsteps grew closer. "You know what the best part is? The developer gave me keys because I've been documenting this building's historical significance for years. They've seen my work. They just don't understand what they're really looking at." As darkness fell, I realized with growing horror that my photos would soon join the others in that darkroom cabinet. Just another series in Martin's collection. But first, he would need to find me. Story 3, The Architect's Mistake. The demolition survey was supposed to be straightforward. The Harmon building had stood vacant for 8 years, a failed office complex from the real estate boom that had bankrupted its developer. As the structural engineer assigned to assess it before implosion, I had 72 hours to confirm it could be safely demolished. "Straightforward job, James," my boss had said. The place never even had tenants. I'd reviewed the original plans that morning. The architect, Robert Harmon, had designed an innovative load-bearing system unconventional but theoretically sound. The building had been his masterpiece, named after himself in an act of professional vanity. Then Harmon committed suicide a week before construction finished. By the time I arrived at the 16-story concrete monolith, evening shadows stretched across its facade. Security let me in with a warning. "Power's been cut for years, elevators don't work. And watch the stairs, some of the landings have shifted." I started on the ground floor, methodically checking support columns and looking for structural degradation. Despite being abandoned, the building was remarkably clean. No vandalism, no squatter debris, just empty offices waiting for occupants who never came. Working my way up floor by floor, I noted minor issues. Some water damage on level 7. Hairline cracks in the concrete on 10. Nothing to indicate serious problems. Until I reached 14. The 14th floor was different. Instead of the open-plan office space shown in the blueprints, I found a maze of narrow corridors. The ceiling was lower, the walls closer together than they should have been. My measurements confirmed what my instincts were screaming. This floor's layout didn't match the plans. More disturbing was the fact that the floor wasn't abandoned like the rest of the building. Desks held stacked papers. Whiteboards displayed complex mathematical formulas. Coffee cups sat half full, their contents long dried into dark stains. It looked like everyone had suddenly walked out in the middle of a workday. In what seemed to be a central conference room, I found sprawling diagrams covering the walls modifications to the building's original design. Red marker highlighted structural elements with urgent notes scrawled in margins. Load miscalculation and resonance factor underestimated. My blood ran cold as I studied the diagrams. If these calculations were correct, Harmon's innovative design had a catastrophic flaw. Under certain conditions, specific occupancy patterns, or even strong winds, the building's unique support system could amplify vibrations instead of dampening them. The building was essentially a tuning fork waiting for the right frequency. A soft sound interrupted my thoughts. Footsteps in the corridor outside. "Hello?" I called out. "Security?" No response, but the footsteps continued moving away. I followed. The corridor led to a smaller office tucked in the corner. Unlike the others, this one was personalized family photos, architectural awards. The nameplate read, Robert Harmon. On the desk sat a leather-bound journal, open to the final entry. "They won't listen. I've shown them the calculations, the fatal flaw in my design. They say it's too late, too expensive to fix. The building is already sold. Occupancy begins next month. I can't have those deaths on my conscience. There's only one way to ensure the building remains empty. The date was the day before Harmon's suicide. With growing horror, I realized the truth. Harmon hadn't killed himself over a failed project. He'd sacrificed himself to create a scandal that would delay occupancy, giving others time to discover the flaw. But the building had gone into legal limbo after his death. No one had ever reviewed his concerns. Just as this realization hit me, the building shuddered. A deep vibration ran through the floor beneath my feet. The half-empty coffee cups trembled. The demolition team had begun preliminary work, setting up equipment outside. Equipment that created vibrations. I ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time despite the danger of shifting landings. The vibration grew stronger. Somewhere above me I heard concrete crack. 14 floors, 13 floors, 12. The calculations suggested the building wouldn't instantly collapse. It would start at the top, floors pancaking down one by one as the resonance built. I was at the 9th floor landing when the stairwell door burst open above me. A man in a suit stood there, thin, pale, with haunted eyes. Before I could speak, he turned and disappeared back through the door. I'd seen that face before, in the photos on the desk. Robert Harmon, a man 8 years dead. Concrete dust rained down as I continued my descent. The 7th floor landing had collapsed completely, forcing me to find another stairwell. The vibrations were everywhere now, growing stronger by the second. The building had found its frequency. When I finally reached the lobby, the security guard was gone. The exit doors were locked, presumably automatically when the building began to detect structural failure. Above me, I could hear the sequential collapse beginning. I had minutes, perhaps seconds. That's when I saw the service door behind the security desk, slightly ajar, as if someone had just used it. I dived through it, finding myself in a maintenance tunnel that led outside. Behind me, the first floors began to collapse. The Harmon building destroyed itself entirely that night, imploding without any controlled demolition required. The official report called it structural failure due to neglect. I never told anyone what I found on the 14th floor, never mentioned that the blueprint anomaly saved my life, and I never included in my report that 17 people died during construction of the Harmon building, all on the 14th floor. Some warnings should be heeded, even when they come too late. Story 4, Storage Unit 273. My brother Aaron's disappearance left me with nothing but questions and a storage unit key. The police investigation stalled after 3 months. No leads, no body, no evidence of foul play. Just his car abandoned near the marina and a text message to me that read, "If anything happens, everything you need is in Unit 273. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, row after row of identical orange doors. I'd put off coming here, clinging to the hope that Aaron would return with some reasonable explanation. Unit 273 was in the back corner, partially obscured by overgrown bushes. The padlock was new, the key sliding in smoothly. When I rolled up the door, I found a makeshift office, a desk with a laptop, filing cabinets, maps and photographs covering the walls. In the center, a corkboard displayed newspaper clippings connected by red string. Every article related to the abandoned Lakeside Psychiatric Hospital closed 15 years ago after budget cuts. The most recent, dated 2 weeks before Aaron disappeared, announced demolition would begin next month. A yellow legal pad on the desk held Aaron's familiar handwriting. Day 14. Confirmed security patrol schedule. 1 guard, hourly rounds between 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Day 17. Found access through basement service tunnel. Main building structurally sound. Day 19. Located patient records in administration wing. Most removed during closure, but some cabinets remained. Day 23. Found references to sublevel B, not on any official blueprints. Access? The final entry, written the day before he disappeared. Found entrance to sublevel B behind radiology. Going back tonight with better equipment. If these records are accurate, what they were doing down there was worse than I imagined. This explains everything about Dad's condition before he died. Our father had been a patient at Lakeside briefly before it closed. He'd died of heart failure 3 years later, but Aaron had always insisted something happened to him there, that he came out changed. The laptop was password protected, but I knew my brother. His passwords were always variations of our childhood dog's name and his birth year. After a few attempts, I was in. His research was meticulous. Interviews with former staff, facility blueprints, patient complaints filed with state agencies. He'd been investigating Lakeside for months, ever since finding Dad's journal hidden in the attic, a journal that described treatments in a sub-basement facility that didn't officially exist. The final folder contained night vision photos of Aaron's explorations. Empty corridors. A nurse's station covered in dust. Patient rooms with beds still made. And eventually, a heavy metal door with radiology stenciled above it. The last photo showed a concrete stairwell descending into darkness. The words, Sublevel B, barely visible on a faded sign. 2 nights later, I approached Lakeside Hospital through the overgrown grounds. The 5-story building loomed against the night sky, windows like vacant eyes. I found the service tunnel exactly where Aaron's notes indicated, a rusted door half hidden by bushes, its lock broken long ago. The beam from my headlamp illuminated peeling paint and water-stained ceilings as I navigated the maze of corridors, Aaron's hand-drawn map guiding me. Every sound water dripping, my own footsteps echoed ominously. I found radiology on the first floor, its heavy door ajar just as in Aaron's photo. Behind it, the stairwell descended into darkness. Sublevel B was different from the floors above, cleaner, more institutional. No graffiti marked these walls. No signs of urban explorers or vandals. It was pristine in its abandonment, as if sealed off and forgotten. The main corridor branched into smaller hallways, each leading to locked rooms with observation windows. Patient rooms, but unlike any I'd seen in Aaron's photos of the upper floors. These had heavy doors with multiple locks, all on the outside. Each room contained a single bed with restraint straps. At the end of the corridor stood a larger room, what appeared to be a control center. Inside, monitoring equipment surrounded a central workstation. Despite years of abandonment, the room was clean. Someone had been here recently. On the workstation lay a digital camera. Aaron's camera. My hands trembled as I turned it on. The battery was nearly dead, but it had enough power to show me the last images taken. Darkness. Then sudden light, as if a door had opened. Blurry figures. The final image was of a hospital ID badge. Though the photo was out of focus, the name was legible. Dr. Martin Reeves, Director of Special Projects. The same name appeared throughout Dad's journal. A sound behind me. Footsteps on the stairs. I killed my light and ducked behind the workstation. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the squeak of wheels. A cart or trolley being pushed. Another one tonight? A man's voice, annoyed. That's 3 this month. Different situation. A second voice, calmer. This one was asking specific questions. Had photographs. Mentioned Sublevel B by name. They passed the control room and continued down the hall. I risked a glance, 2 men in maintenance uniforms pushing a gurney with a body bag. I followed at a distance, staying in the shadows. They wheeled the gurney to a door at the end of the hallway labeled Utility. Inside was an elevator 1, not shown on any blueprint. When the doors closed behind them, I examined the control panel. Only 2 buttons, B and C. We were already on level B. What was level C? I didn't press the button. Instead, I searched every room in the corridor, looking for any sign of Aaron. In the last room, I found his backpack stuffed behind a heating vent. Inside was his journal, with entries not included in his notes at the storage unit. The final pages detailed his discovery that Lakeside hadn't closed because of budget cuts. It closed because whatever experiments they conducted in the sublevels had drawn attention from state investigators. But rather than shut down completely, the program had gone deeper, literally. On Level C had never been on any official blueprint. It existed off the grid with independent power and separate access points. According to Aaron's notes, it was still operational. And my father hadn't been a patient. He'd been an employee one who threatened to expose their work. The elevator hummed. They were coming back up. I retreated to the stairwell, Aaron's backpack clutched to my chest. As I climbed the stairs, I heard the elevator doors open and a voice call out, "Check all the rooms. If his brother made it down here, we can't let him leave." I ran, no longer caring about stealth. Behind me, flashlight beams cut through the darkness of the corridor. The upper floors of the hospital became my sanctuary. I knew the layout from Aaron's maps, while my pursuers hesitated each junction. I lost them in the twisted corridors of the fourth floor, doubling back to exit through a fire escape Aaron had marked as always unlocked. I made it to my car and drove straight to the police station, Aaron's backpack on the passenger seat. When I arrived, I reached for it, only to find it open and empty. The journal was gone. The officer who took my report was polite but skeptical. Without evidence, it was just another wild theory about an old hospital scheduled for demolition next week. When they finally agreed to search the hospital 3 days later, they found nothing. No sublevel B. No elevator. The entire basement had been filled with concrete. The demolition proceeded as scheduled. Whatever secrets Lakeside Hospital held were buried under tons of rubble. I still have the storage unit, still have Aaron's laptop and notes, and sometimes I receive text messages from his number blank, no content. The police say it's a technical glitch. I know better. Sublevel C is still out there, somewhere beneath the ruins. And so is my brother. Story 5. The Lighthouse Keeper. The job listing didn't mention isolation. Historic lighthouse caretaker needed. Winter maintenance position. October-March. Housing provided. Nothing about the nearest town being 40 minutes away, or that winter storms would regularly cut the peninsula off completely. Probably just left when that big storm hit in February, the Park Service representative explained as she handed me the keys. Happens sometimes. People think they want solitude until they actually have it. The Storm Point Lighthouse had stood for 127 years, automated for the past 30. My job wasn't to tend the light that ran on its own systems, but to maintain the historical building during harsh winter months when tourists were gone and fierce storms battered the coast. The living quarters are fully modernized, she continued. Wi-Fi spotty during storms, but the landline is reliable. Generator kicks in if power fails. The lighthouse itself was beautiful. A white tower rising 120 feet above the cliff edge, its beam slicing through fog each night. The first month passed uneventfully. I settled into a routine, morning inspections, minor repairs, logs updated by evening. November brought the first real storm. Winds exceeding 60 miles per hour battered the peninsula for 3 days. The power failed as expected. The generator hummed to life. I watched massive waves explode against the rocks below, sending spray higher than the lighthouse itself. That's when I first heard it, a banging from somewhere in the tower, rhythmic, like someone knocking. I assumed it was wind-driven debris hitting the structure. Once the storm passed, I did a thorough inspection but found nothing damaged. 2 weeks later, another storm hit, worse than the first. The access road flooded, cutting me off completely. Again came the knocking, louder this time, seeming to come from the top of the tower. The lighthouse's original logs, bound in leather volumes in the office bookcase, had always intrigued me. That night, unable to sleep because of the noise, I began reading entries from the 1890s. Most were mundane weather observations, supply deliveries. But entries from the winter of 1894 caught my attention. The headkeeper, Thomas Walton, described increasingly strange occurrences during storms. November 18th, 1894. Strange knocking sounds from the lantern room during tonight's gale. Henderson believes it's the wind, but the rhythm is too regular. December 7th, 1894. Knocking returned with the storm. Stronger now. Henderson refuses to go up alone. January 15th, 1895. The storm has cut us off for 9 days. Henderson disappeared last night. Went to investigate the knocking and never returned. Searched the entire tower at first light. No sign of him. The door to the gallery was open, despite being latched the evening prior. The final entry was dated February 3rd, 1895. The knocking is constant now. I know what it wants. It wants me to open the door during the storm, to step onto the gallery. Henderson must have done so. I've nailed the door shut. They will find me here when the winter ends. But according to a newspaper article tucked into the log, they hadn't found him there. Thomas Walton had disappeared just like his assistant. I contacted the Historical Society in town and asked about the lighthouse's history, specifically about missing keepers. He wasn't the only one, the woman finally said. There have been others, always during winter storms, always when the keeper was alone. How many? 7 that we know of. The last was your predecessor. I felt cold despite the heating system's steady output. What happened to them? No one knows. The official record says they abandoned their posts, but there's always been talk that something about Storm Point Lighthouse attracts certain forces during winter storms. The locals say it's built on a spot where the boundary between worlds grows thin when the weather turns violent. The storm continued for 5 days. The knocking became a constant companion, most intense at night. I avoided the tower, staying in the keeper's quarters. On the 5th night, the generator failed. Total darkness enveloped the peninsula. Nothing but howling wind and that persistent knocking, now louder than ever. I fumbled for my flashlight and made my way to the generator room. The machine had simply stopped. No obvious damage. As I attempted to restart it, my flashlight beam caught something scratched into the wall behind it. Names. 7 names, each with a date. The last was Martin Wells, February 2023, my predecessor. Below the names, a message. It knows you're alone. Don't answer the knocking. The cold that washed over me had nothing to do with the power failure. I backed out of the room, flashlight beam shaking. The knocking had stopped. Instead, footsteps echoed from inside the tower, heavy, deliberate steps descending the spiral staircase, coming down from the lantern room. I retreated to the kitchen, grabbing a knife. The footsteps continued, reaching the bottom of the tower. The door connecting the lighthouse to the keeper's quarters, a door I had closed and locked, slowly began to open. My flashlight flickered, then died. In the darkness, I heard breathing, not my own. Cold air rushed past me, carrying the scent of seawater and decay. The landline phone rang, startling me so badly I dropped the knife. I fumbled for it in the dark. Hello? This is Park Service Emergency Response. We're checking on all remote stations during the storm. Are you all right out there? No, I managed, my voice shaking. Something's in here with me. Sir, remain calm. The storm is affecting your satellite phone connection. We can barely hear you. The landline, I corrected. I'm on the landline. A pause. Sir, the landline at Storm Point was disconnected last season after the fiber optic installation. You should be using the satellite phone we provided. The line went dead. The phone in my hand was ice cold. The breathing in the darkness grew closer. I ran, out the front door, into the raging storm, down the path toward the access road. Rain and wind battered me as I stumbled through puddles and mud. Behind me, the lighthouse beam suddenly blazed to life, sweeping across the peninsula. When it passed over me, I saw I wasn't alone on the path. Figures stood in the darkness, 7 of them, soaking wet, clothes rotting, faces pale and bloated, eyes fixed on me with terrible recognition. I changed direction, heading for the cliff edge where a maintenance path led down to the beach. If I could reach my truck parked near the boathouse. The beam swept over me again. The figures were closer now, moving with unnatural speed when the light passed. Their mouths moved in unison, saying something I couldn't hear over the storm. At the cliff edge, I looked back one last time. The lighthouse beam illuminated all 7 figures standing in a semicircle, cutting off my retreat. In the brief illumination, I could finally read their lips. Don't answer the knocking. I took the path down, fighting against wind that seemed determined to push me over the edge. When I reached the beach, my truck was where I'd left it. The key turned on the first try. As I drove along the flooded access road, water sometimes reaching the hood, I checked the rearview mirror constantly. The lighthouse beam swung regularly, illuminating the road behind me in rhythmic flashes. In one of those flashes, I saw a figure standing in the model of the road, not one of the 7, but something else, something that had been knocking. I didn't stop to see more. The Park Service found my truck abandoned at the mainland end of the Peninsula Road the next morning. According to their reports, I was never seen again, the 8th keeper to vanish from Storm Point. But reports can be wrong. I'm alive, writing this from a motel 200 miles inland. I haven't slept properly since that night. Every time I close my eyes, I see those 7 figures and feel the presence of whatever was coming down the tower stairs. I called the Park Service the day after my escape. The woman who answered sounded genuinely surprised to hear from me. "We thought you'd abandoned your post," she said. "Like the others." I tried to explain what happened. She listened politely, then asked me to come in for a debriefing. I declined. Instead, I drove to the County Historical Society to learn more about Storm Point. The elderly archivist seemed unsurprised by my questions. "You're not the first keeper to come looking for answers," she said, retrieving a file box from a locked cabinet. "Though usually they come before taking the position, not after." The box contained newspaper clippings spanning more than a century. The pattern was unmistakable. Approximately every 15 years, a keeper disappeared during a winter storm. The official explanation was always abandonment of post, despite personal belongings left behind. "The Park Service knows," I said, realization dawning. "They know about the disappearances." The archivist nodded. "They've always known. Every government agency responsible for that lighthouse has known. They just don't talk about it publicly. Why keep staffing it? Why not just let the automated systems run it? Because they tried that back in the 1980s when the light was first automated. 3 ships wrecked on the rocks that winter. 37 people died." She handed me a fade photograph. This was taken by a rescue helicopter after the 3rd wreck. The image showed Storm Point Lighthouse during a storm, its beam cutting through heavy snowfall. But instead of pointing out to sea, the beam was directed inland toward the Peninsula Road. "The light was deliberately redirected," I whispered. "Exactly. Without a human presence in the lighthouse, whatever is there takes control of the beacon." She closed the box. The Park Service made a calculation. 1 keeper every 15 years or dozens of sailors' lives. "You're saying they use us as sacrifices?" "I'm saying they found that a human presence keeps the light pointing in the right direction most of the time. Only 1 per cycle disappears." I thought of the 7 figures on the path. What happens to them? No one knows, but there's a theory. She pulled out one final document. A letter written by a keeper in 1937 who survived his term. He believed the lighthouse itself chooses, that it tests each keeper during the worst storms, and takes the one who answers the knocking. I remembered the words the figures seemed to be saying. "Don't answer the knocking." I didn't answer it, I said. "I never opened the door to the gallery." "Then you pass the test, but there will be others who don't." She looked at me with tired eyes. "Why do you think they hire new keepers every season? They need someone who doesn't know what to expect." 3 days later, another storm hit the coast. On the news, I watched footage of a fishing trawler being rescued after nearly hitting the rocks near Storm Point. The reporter mentioned that navigational errors had led the ship dangerously close to shore. I knew it wasn't an error. The light had been redirected again. That night, I packed my bag. I didn't want to go back. Everything in me screamed against it, but I couldn't live with more deaths on my conscience. As I pulled into the Peninsula Road the next morning, the lighthouse stood silhouetted against the cloudy sky, no longer inviting, but not quite threatening either. It was simply waiting. The Park Service administrator met me at the keeper's house, visibly relieved. "Everything is as you left it," she said, handing me the keys. "We've installed a new generator, more reliable." "I have conditions," I told her. "Written documentation of everything you know about this place. The truth about the previous keepers. And triple the original salary." She nodded without hesitation. "There's a manual in the office that will answer most of your questions. It's only given to keepers who return." That night, alone again in the keeper's house, I found the manual hidden behind the old logs. Storm Point Protocols, read the cover, dated 1896, just after the first disappearances. Inside were detailed instructions, observations, and theories compiled by those who had survived their terms. The most important rule, highlighted and repeated throughout: never answer the knocking. Never open the door to the gallery during a storm. I settled in for the winter, more vigilant than before. The knocking returned with the next storm, as expected. I ignored it, focusing instead on monitoring the light to ensure it remained pointed out to sea. The 7 figures sometimes appear on the path during the worst weather. I've come to see them not as threats but as warnings, reminders of what happens to those who answer when the lighthouse calls. I don't know if I'll take another season after this one, but for now I keep the light burning in the right direction, and when the knocking comes, I remember the faces of those who weren't as fortunate. The knocking continues. I don't answer. Story 6. The subway terminal. The Chicago Transit Authority hired me to document the abandoned Harrison Street subway terminal before its scheduled demolition. As an architectural photographer specializing in urban decay, I'd captured dozens of forgotten spaces beneath the city, but something about this assignment felt different from the start. "You'll have 3 days," my CTA contact explained, handing me an ancient brass key and a hard hat. "Power's been restored to the main platforms, but tread carefully. The place has been sealed since 1979. The access point was hidden in plain sight. A maintenance door in an active subway station that opened to a narrow staircase spiraling into darkness. As I descended, the sounds of the busy station faded, replaced by the soft drip of water and the distant rumble of trains passing through nearby tunnels. The main platform stretched into shadows, its tile work intact, benches still bolted to the floor. Advertisement posters from the late 1970s promoted movies and cigarettes from another era. A construction schedule on the wall listed tasks never completed, the last entry dated September 17, 1979. By late afternoon, I had worked my way to the far end of the eastbound platform. My flash illuminated something unexpected, a door marked Station Manager that wasn't on my blueprints. It was unlocked. The office beyond was untouched, as if the occupant had just stepped out. Papers covered the desk. A coffee mug contained dark residue. Most surprising was a logbook open to September 1979, with entries continuing well past the terminal's official closure date. The final entry read, Day 47 of observation. Subject continues to follow pattern. Will attempt contact tonight. If unsuccessful, implementing containment protocol. I photographed the logbook, increasingly unsettled. According to official records, this place had been abandoned before completion, yet someone had been working here for at least 47 days after the supposed closure. Inside the desk drawer, I found an unmarked manila envelope containing black and white photographs. They showed the same platform I'd been photographing, but with subtle differences: equipment in different positions, different construction materials. More disturbing were the photos taken from security cameras. Each showed a solitary figure on the platform, always distant, always blurred, always in the same location near the tunnel entrance. The images were time-stamped between 2:15 and 2:20 a.m. across different dates. By evening, I had completed about a third of my planned shots, I decided to pack up rather than risk exhaustion. As I gathered my equipment, the lights, which had been functioning reliably all day, flickered briefly. I froze, listening. The constant background rumble of distant trains had stopped. The terminal was silent except for the steady drip of water. Checking my watch, I saw it was 11:47 p.m. The last trains would still be running in the main system. There should be ambient noise from them passing nearby. As I headed toward the exit stairwell, my flashlight beam swept across something on the platform, fresh footprints in the dust, not my own. They led from the unmapped maintenance tunnel toward the train tunnel, then disappeared. The footprints troubled me enough that I followed them to the tunnel entrance. The tracks stretched into darkness beyond the platform's end. Standard subway rails. Except for one detail, they showed signs of recent use. The usual dust covering everything else was absent from the rail tops. I leaned over the platform edge, shining my light down the tunnel. The beam caught a glimpse of movement. Just a shadow, there, and gone so quickly, I couldn't be certain I'd seen anything. A distant mechanical sound echoed through the tunnel, the unmistakable noise of a subway car in motion, but distorted somehow, deeper and slower than normal. At the base of the exit stairwell, I found my escape route blocked. The door I'd come through was locked from the other side, the ancient key useless. I tried my phone, no service, as expected this far underground. Making my way through maintenance corridors, I followed signs to what should have been another stairwell. Instead, I found the unmapped tunnel I'd seen earlier. With no other options, I entered the tunnel. The passage descended gradually, curving away from the main terminal. After several minutes of walking, I noticed something odd about the construction. The concrete grew progressively older looking, the design subtly different. Almost as if I was walking backward through different eras of subway construction. The tunnel eventually opened into a small control room filled with equipment that didn't match the 1970s technology in the main terminal. This looked older 1950s, perhaps earlier. A thick layer of dust covered everything except one control panel, which showed signs of recent use. A logbook similar to the one I'd found earlier sat open on the desk. The final entry, dated October 15, 1979, read, "Containment breach imminent. Subject has established temporal corridor between systems. Harrison Terminal project being officially terminated to prevent public exposure. Sealing access points tonight. God help Walters." A map on the wall showed the Chicago subway system, but with significant differences from the one I knew. Additional lines that had never been built. Stations that didn't exist. And Harrison Terminal marked as an active interchange, not an abandoned project. A noise from the corridor outside. Footsteps approaching. I ducked behind equipment racks, heart pounding. Through a gap, I watched as a man in a CTA maintenance uniform entered. The name patch on his uniform read D. Walters. He spoke without turning, his voice weary. "You can come out. I know you're there. You're the photographer they sent." Slowly, I emerged from my hiding place. "How did you know about me?" He gave a humorless laugh. "You've been here before. We'll be here again." I don't understand. Neither did I, at first. Walters checked his watch. "We have about 20 minutes before it arrives. Just enough time to explain." He pointed to the control panel. "This station exists in multiple timelines simultaneously. A temporal junction point. In some realities, the Harrison project was completed in different decades. In others, like yours, it was abandoned." "That's not possible," I insisted. 4 months ago, I was just like you, rational, skeptical. Then I started noticing discrepancies during night shifts. Equipment moving between rounds. Maintenance logs updated by hands that weren't mine. He tapped the photographs on the wall. Eventually, I realized what was happening. The boundaries between timelines are weakest here, at this exact spot. The lights flickered again. A deep rumbling began, more felt than heard. "It's coming earlier tonight," Walters muttered, glancing nervously at the tunnel entrance. "Listen carefully. In 1977, in my timeline, they discovered the junction while building this station. Instead of closing it, they studied it, used it, sent people through to other timelines. The project went wrong. Something followed them back. What are you talking about? What followed them back? We called it the displacement. It looks like a subway train, but it's not. It travels between timelines, taking people, replacing them with versions from other realities. His eyes were wide, haunted. It's been taking night workers for months, replacing them with duplicates who aren't quite right. The rumbling grew stronger. Dust shook from the ceiling. Tonight, they're sealing everything for good, both in my timeline and yours. We have to get out before... The tunnel flooded with light. A sound like metal grinding against metal echoed through the chamber. Walters grabbed my arm. Run. Back to the main platform. It always appears at 2:17. We sprinted through the tunnel as the light behind us grew brighter. The rumbling became a roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Emerging onto the main platform, Walters pulled me toward the station manager's office. There's an emergency exit here they added later or earlier, depending on your perspective. Behind us, something emerged from the train tunnel, a subway car unlike any I'd seen before. Its design was an impossible mixture of different eras, its metal skin rippling as if not entirely solid. The doors slid open with a hiss. Walters yanked open a panel hidden behind a map on the office wall, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft with a ladder. Climb. It leads to an access point 2 blocks away. As I started up the ladder, Walters looked back toward the platform. His body tensed. Go! He shouted. Don't stop. And whatever happens, don't ever come back here. I climbed frantically, the sounds of the station fading below me. Near the top, I heard Walters cry out once, a sound abruptly cut short. The access point emerged in an alley behind an abandoned convenience store. I stumbled into the pre-dawn street, gasping for air. Hours later, when I called my CTA contact, she had no record of hiring me for any Harrison Terminal project. When I insisted, she checked their archives. There was a Harrison expansion planned in the 1970s, she confirmed, but it never broke ground. The funding was redirected to other projects. My photos from the terminal had vanished from my camera's memory card, replaced with images of an empty construction site. The only evidence remaining was the manila envelope of photographs I'd taken from the desk, now showing nothing but blank paper. A week later, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single page torn from a logbook, the handwriting unmistakably belonging to D. Walters. If you're reading this, I failed to make it out. I've left similar messages in 17 timelines now. The displacement can't be stopped, only avoided. Harrison will be demolished in your timeline soon. When they break ground for the new development, something will be discovered in the foundations. Don't be there when it happens. Don't let them rebuild on that spot. The Harrison Terminal demolition is scheduled for next month. The CTA has announced a new transit hub will be constructed on the site. I've provided my architectural photographs of other locations for the project publicity. But I won't be attending the groundbreaking ceremony. Instead, I'll be on a plane to another city, another country, if possible. Because sometimes abandoned places aren't truly abandoned. They're just waiting for the right time to reopen their doors. Story 7. The Film School. The ad on the university job board seemed perfect. Weekend caretaker needed for Riverside Film Institute building. Art, film students preferred. $300/weekend. Minimal responsibilities. As a second-year film student drowning in student loan debt, I needed the money. The interview was brief, just signing forms and receiving keys to the imposing brick building that had once been the city's premier film school before closing 3 years ago when the new campus opened across town. Just keep an eye on things, the facilities manager explained. Check for leaks after rain. Make sure no one breaks in. The security system still works. Just enter this code when you arrive and leave. The building stood isolated at the edge of campus, surrounded by overgrown grounds. 5 stories of weathered brick with arched windows and a formal facade that spoke of the building's 1920s origins. My first weekend was uneventful. I brought my laptop, camped out in what had been the main office, and worked on screenplays between hourly rounds. The building's emptiness was peaceful rather than unsettling. The second weekend, rain lashed against the windows all night. While placing buckets under drips in a third-floor classroom, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before, tucked into an alcove partially hidden by a supply cabinet. It opened to a narrow staircase leading to some intermediate level between floors. At the top was another door, locked. I tried my master key, but it didn't fit. Making a note to ask the facilities manager about it, I returned to my rounds. The next morning, I flipped through previous caretaker logs. 8 months ago, the caretaker at the time, someone named Marcus, had written, "Discovered access to projection room on 3.5 floor. Not on building plans. Equipment still installed. Requesting guidance on securing vintage film reels found inside." The next entry read simply, "Do not enter projection room. Administration notified. Awaiting specialized removal team for film stock. Potentially hazardous nitrate film." 2 weeks after that entry, a new caretaker had taken over with no further mention of the projection room. During my third weekend shift, I brought a flashlight with a stronger beam. After completing my evening rounds, I returned to the mysterious staircase. The lock was old, a simple pin tumbler that might yield to the right technique. It took 20 minutes of careful manipulation before the lock finally clicked open. The room beyond was not what I expected. Rather than a projection booth, I found myself in a private screening room. A 16 mm projector stood on a table facing a small screen. 8 film canisters were stacked neatly beside it. Most surprising was the room's condition. No dust, no signs of abandonment. Unlike the rest of the building, this space appeared to have been used recently. I examined the film canisters. Each was labeled with a number and date, the most recent from just 4 months ago, well after the building had been closed. I carefully opened the most recent canister. The film inside was not yellowed nitrate but modern safety film in excellent condition. I held a frame up to my flashlight. It showed the building's main entrance, filmed from across the street. I threaded the projector, powered it on, and was surprised when it hummed to life immediately. The footage began playing steady, static shots of the building from various angles. Each shot held for exactly 1 minute before cutting to the next position. After about 5 minutes, the pattern changed. Now the camera was inside the building, moving slowly through corridors I recognized. Then it entered the main office, my regular post during my shifts. The exact desk where I left my laptop was framed in center screen. The footage cut to a different angle, looking down at the desk from a corner of the ceiling. A figure entered frame. Me, during my first weekend shift, working on my screenplay. I froze the projector. This was impossible. The building had been closed for 3 years. The security cameras had been removed. Who had filmed me? And why? With growing unease, I continued the projection. More footage followed me, making rounds, checking doors, even nodding off briefly in the office chair. The film ended. I opened the oldest canister, dated 3 years earlier, just before the building's closure. This footage showed a film class in session. Students clustered around cameras, a professor demonstrating techniques. The middle portion focused on one particular student, a young woman who remained unaware of being filmed as she worked alone in an editing suite late at night. The final sequence showed her leaving the building. The camera followed at a distance as she walked across the darkened campus to her car. With mounting horror, I opened the next canister. The same student appeared, still being observed without her knowledge. Each subsequent reel continued this pattern, the surveillance growing more intrusive, following her to her apartment, filming through her windows. The 6th canister contained news clippings spliced between footage. Headlines about a missing student. Her face, the same woman from the film's on missing person posters. I couldn't bring myself to watch the final canister. Instead, I gathered everything, intending to take it directly to campus police. As I reached for the door, the projector suddenly clicked back on behind me. I hadn't touched it. On the screen appeared a single shot of the building's main entrance live footage, showing the current rain-slicked steps outside. As I watched, a figure entered frame, approaching the door with keys in hand. The facilities manager who had no reason to be here at 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday. I killed the projector and lights, gathered the film canisters, and listened. From below came the sound of the main door opening, followed by footsteps too careful to be casual. The footsteps methodically moved through the building, a search pattern, growing closer, then ascending to the third floor. I pressed against the wall beside the door, hardly daring to breathe. A flashlight beam swept under the door as someone paused in the hallway outside. The doorknob turned slowly. I clutched the film canister, ready to use it as a weapon if necessary. The door opened an inch, then stopped as a voice called from the first floor. "Campus security. Anyone in the building, identify yourself." The door quickly closed. Footsteps hurried away toward the stairs. I waited 5 minutes before risking a look outside. The hallway was empty. Taking the film canisters, I crept down the stairs and encountered 2 campus security officers. "We received an anonymous call about suspicious activity in this building. Have you seen anyone else inside?" "The facilities manager was just here," I said. The officers exchanged glances. "Sir, the facilities manager is on medical leave, has been for 3 weeks." At home, I contacted the student newspaper archives, searching for information about missing students. I found her. Catherine Chen, second-year cinematography student, disappeared 3 years ago. Case still open. Last seen leaving the Riverside Film Institute building late one night. The next morning, I took the films to the police. When detectives viewed the footage, the investigation into Catherine's disappearance was immediately reopened. Analysis of the films revealed metadata identifying the camera equipment signed out to Marcus Wells, the former caretaker whose log entries I'd read, the same Marcus who had discovered the projection room. They found him living 2 states away, teaching at a community college. In his apartment were more films, more victims. The projection room had been his editing suite, where he compiled his surveillance trophies. I never returned to the caretaker job. The building stands empty now, truly abandoned, as police evidence teams continue their work inside. The most disturbing revelation came weeks later, when police disclosed their theory of how Marcus selected his victims. He didn't choose them randomly. He'd chosen film students who expressed interest in the building's history, who asked questions about rooms not on official maps, who noticed details others missed. Students exactly like me. I changed my major to business administration the next day. Some abandoned places should remain unexplored. Some stories should stay unfilmed. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe for more horror stories on Moonlit Scarecrow.